He was an 18-year-old kid who aged out of the system with nothing but a worn backpack and the ghosts of a life he never knew. Then a stranger's will handed him an entire vineyard, and he discovered that an inheritance isn't just about what you're given. It's about what you're willing to fight for. If you've ever felt like you were starting from zero, or if you've ever been handed a chance that felt too big to handle, then I need you to stick with me through this. Hit that subscribe button, because this isn't just my story. It's for anyone who has ever had to build a home out of the pieces someone else left behind. The air in the group home always smelled the same. A sterile, lemon-scented cleaner that never quite covered the underlying scent of simmering anxiety and microwaved food. For 8 years, that was the smell of my life. On the morning of my 18th birthday, it smelled no different, but I was breathing it in for the last time. My duffel bag was on the bed, half empty. It didn't take long to pack a life that could fit into a single bag. A few changes of clothes, a worn copy of a book I'd read a dozen times, a toothbrush, and a small framed photo of a woman with my eyes. My mother. I never knew her, not really. She was a ghost story they told me in pieces, a collection of case file notes and whispered rumors from social workers who came and went like seasons. "Leo, you ready?" Brenda, my caseworker, stood in the doorway. She wasn't unkind, just permanently tired, her face a roadmap of other people's crises. She'd been my caseworker for the last 2 years, which was a record. I nodded, zipping the bag. The sound was unnervingly final. "I guess. Got your paperwork," she said, holding up a thick manila envelope. "Final release forms, your birth certificate, social security card, all the fun stuff." She tried for a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "And this came for you, in the mail, yesterday." She handed me a second envelope. It was different from the drab government manila. This one was heavy, cream-colored, made of thick, expensive paper. My name, Leo Vance, was written across the front in elegant, old-fashioned cursive. There was no return address, only a postmark from a town I'd never heard of. Solitude Creek, California. "Who's it from?" I asked, turning it over in my hands. It felt important, heavy, with more than just paper. Brenda shrugged. "No idea. Legally, we're not supposed to open your mail after you turn 18. It's all yours now." She gestured down the hall. "Come on, your bus leaves in an hour. We'll get you to the station." The ride to the Greyhound station was silent. What was there to say? Good luck? Don't mess up? I'd heard it all before. The world outside the van window was a blur of concrete and strip malls, the same scenery I'd stared at for years, always from the inside looking out. Now, the door was open, and I had no idea where I was supposed to go. My plan, if you could call it that, was to take a bus to a city a few hours away, find a dishwashing job, and rent a room somewhere cheap. It was a flimsy blueprint for a life, but it was the only one I had. At the station, the smell of diesel fumes and stale coffee replaced the lemon-scented cleaner. It was the smell of transit, of people going somewhere. Brenda handed me the manila envelope and a small wad of cash. "This is the last of your state stipend. It's not much, but it'll get you a room for a week or two if you're smart." "Thanks," I mumbled, stuffing it into my pocket. She hesitated, her professional mask cracking for just a second. "Leo, you're a good kid. You've had it rougher than most. Just be careful out there. The world isn't always fair." "I know," I said. It was the one lesson the system had taught me thoroughly. She gave my shoulder a quick, awkward squeeze, and then she was gone, leaving me alone on a sticky plastic bench under the flickering fluorescent lights of the bus terminal. I was officially an adult, officially free. I had never felt more terrified in my entire life. I looked down at the 2 envelopes in my lap. One held the flimsy, bureaucratic proof of my existence. The other was a mystery. I decided to open the mystery first. My fingers trembled slightly as I tore the seal. Inside, there was a single folded sheet of the same heavy paper and a small antique-looking iron key. The letter was from a law firm, Albright and Associates, attorneys at law. The words were dense, full of legal jargon I could barely understand. Last will and testament, bequeathed, sole heir, probate court. I scanned through the confusing sentences, my heart starting to pound, until I found a name that made me stop. Arthur Vance. The letter stated that upon the event of his passing, his entire estate was to be transferred to his sole surviving heir, his grandson, Leo Vance. Me, Vance. It was my mother's last name, the one they'd given me, but I didn't have a grandfather. My file said my mother was an orphan, that she had no family. I'd read that file 100 times, searching for any connection, any root, any sign that I came from somewhere. It always came up empty. This had to be a mistake. Some other Leo Vance. But the letter included my date of birth. It was me. According to the letter, the estate consisted of a property, 114 acres of land, a farmhouse, and all associated buildings and equipment, located in Solitude Creek. The final paragraph instructed me to contact a Miss Eleanor Albright to arrange the transfer of the deed. Her phone number was listed at the bottom. I stared at the words, my mind reeling. 114 acres. A farmhouse. It sounded like something from a movie, not something that happened to a kid aging out of foster care. A cold wave of suspicion washed over me. It had to be a scam, a cruel joke. People like me didn't inherit things. We were the ones who were left behind. I sat there for a long time, the bus to my dishwashing future idling at the gate. The announcement for its final boarding call crackled over the intercom. I looked at the bus ticket in my hand, then at the letter. One was a path I understood, a continuation of the life I'd always known. Scraping by, staying invisible, expecting nothing. The other was a locked door in the middle of a fog. The iron key in my palm felt cold and real. My entire life, I had been a leaf blown around by the system. For the first time, I had a choice that was entirely my own. I let the bus pull away from the station. I took a deep breath, pulled out my cheap burner phone, and dialed the number for Albright and Associates. The voice that answered was crisp and professional. Eleanor Albright speaking. My own voice came out as a quiet croak. Hello, my name is Leo Vance. I think you sent me a letter. There was a pause on the other end, the sound of papers rustling. Mr. Vance, yes, I've been expecting your call. I am the executor of your grandfather's estate. When can you come to my office? My grandfather. She said it so easily, so matter-of-factly. The word felt foreign and strange on my tongue. I don't have a grandfather. According to this file, you do, she replied, her tone softening slightly, becoming less lawyerly and more human. His name was Arthur Vance, and he left you everything he had. I think it's best we discuss this in person. My office is in Napa, about a 2-hour drive from Solitude Creek. Can you get here? Napa. It was in the opposite direction of the life I'd planned. It was in the direction of the unknown. Yes, I heard myself say, the word tasting of a strange new feeling. Maybe it was hope. I can be there tomorrow. The bus ride to Napa was surreal. I watched the sprawling gray of the city suburbs melt away into rolling green hills dotted with oak trees. I'd never seen country like this, so wide and open. It was the kind of landscape that made you feel small, but not in a bad way. It was a clean, quiet smallness, not the suffocating smallness of the group home. I spent the last of my stipend on the bus ticket and a cheap motel room for the night, a tiny, musty box with a humming air conditioner. I barely slept. I kept taking out the letter and the key, reading the words over and over, trying to make them feel real. Arthur Vance, my grandfather. Why had I never heard of him? Why did my file say my mother had no one? The questions circled in my head, a swarm of mysteries with no answers. The next morning, I found Miss Albright's office in a small, respectable-looking brick building on a tree-lined street. It was a world away from the government offices and social service centers I was used to. Inside, it was quiet, with the scent of old books and lemon polish. A receptionist led me to a conference room with a large mahogany table. A few minutes later, Eleanor Albright walked in. She was older than I expected, maybe in her late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple, well-tailored suit. She wasn't warm exactly, but she had an air of calm competence that was strangely reassuring. "Mr. Vance," she said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." She sat opposite me and opened a thick file folder on the table between us. "I was your grandfather's lawyer for over 30 years, she began, her voice measured and precise. "He was a very private man, very determined. He made me promise not to contact you until your 18th birthday. He was adamant about that." Why? The question burst out of me. Why would he wait? Why did I never know he existed? She gave me a long, searching look. "Arthur's story is complicated, and it's his to tell. He left you a great deal more than just property, Leo. He left you his words. But first, the legal matters." She slid a sheaf of papers across the table. "This is the deed to the property. It's officially yours, free and clear. There is no mortgage. The property taxes are paid up for the year." She then slid a bank book across. "He also left you a small savings account. It contains $5,000. He specified it was to be used for immediate living expenses and to get the power and water turned back on at the house." I stared at the bank book. $5,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It felt like a fortune. I don't understand. Why would a complete stranger do this for me? "He wasn't a stranger, Leo," she said gently. "He was your grandfather. He knew all about you. He followed your life from a distance. He knew which homes you were in. He knew when you were moved. He just couldn't be a part of it." "Why not?" I pressed, my voice thick with an old, familiar ache. The ache of being unwanted. Miss Albright sighed, her professional demeanor softening further. "That's part of the story he wanted to tell you himself. The property, the farm. It's been in your family for generations. It was his home. It was your mother's home. And he wanted it to be yours. But he also knew he was leaving you with a tremendous burden." "A burden?" "The vineyard hasn't been operational for nearly a decade. The fields are fallow, the equipment is old, the house has been sitting empty. It needs work. A lot of work." She paused, then added, "And there are people who want the land. People who have wanted it for a very long time. A development corporation called Viridian Properties has made a standing offer to buy the entire parcel. It's a significant amount of money. Enough to set you up for life. Anywhere you wanted to go." She slid another document across the table. It was a formal offer letter from Viridian. The number printed at the bottom made my breath catch in my throat. It was millions. I could see my flimsy dishwashing plan evaporate in the face of that number. I could go anywhere, be anyone. I wouldn't have to struggle for a single day. The easy way out. Arthur knew they would come to you the moment he was gone, Miss Albright said, watching my face. He wanted you to have the choice. You can sell it, take the money, and never look back. No one would blame you, or you can keep it, and that's where his real inheritance comes in. She pushed one last thing across the table. It was another cream-colored envelope, identical to the first, sealed with wax. He left this for you. He said you should only read it when you were standing on the property. He said it would explain everything. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavier than the first one. I looked from the multi-million-dollar offer to the sealed letter. One was a future, handed to me on a silver platter. The other was a past I had never been allowed to have. The iron key from the first letter was in my pocket. Now I had the key to the story, too. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Now," Miss Albright said, standing up, "you go home." The final leg of the journey was a small dusty bus that wound its way out of Napa and up into the hills. The landscape grew wilder, the roads narrower. Solitude Creek wasn't so much a town as a crossroads with a gas station, a general store, and a diner with a faded sign. I got off the bus and stood there with my duffel bag, the afternoon sun beating down on my neck. The air smelled of dust and dry grass and something else, something sweet and green. The property was another 3 miles up a winding dirt road. There were no taxis. I started walking. The silence was immense, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the gravel and the buzz of insects in the tall golden grass. After about a mile, a beat-up old pickup truck slowed down beside me, kicking up a cloud of dust. The man behind the wheel was weathered, his face a permanent squint from years in the sun. "You look lost," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm looking for the old Vance place," I told him. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. He looked me over, from my worn-out jeans to the duffel bag slung over my shoulder. "Arthur's place? No one's been up there in years." "You family?" "His grandson," I said, the words feeling a little more real this time. The man nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I'll be damned. He always said someone would come back one day. Name's Cal. I own the garage down at the crossroads. Hop in. It's a hell of a walk." I threw my bag in the back and climbed into the cab. It smelled of oil and earth. As we drove, Cal talked. He told me about Arthur, about how he'd kept to himself the last couple of decades, how he'd let the vineyard go, but never the land itself. He was a stubborn old goat, Cal said with a rough affection. Turned down a fortune for that place more times than I can count. Said it wasn't his to sell. Said it was a promise. A promise. The word echoed in my mind. We rounded a final bend, and Cal pointed. "There she is." My breath caught. Nestled in a small valley was a sweep of land that rolled out like a rumpled green and gold blanket. Rows upon rows of gnarled, leafless grapevines marched up the hillsides, their woody arms reaching for the sky like sleeping soldiers. In the center of it all, sheltered by a grove of ancient oak trees, was a 2-story farmhouse. It was simple, white paint peeling, a wide porch sagging slightly on one end. It looked forgotten, it looked lonely, but it also looked solid, like it had been waiting. Cal dropped me at the end of a long, overgrown driveway. "House has been locked up tight since he passed," he said, looking at the farmhouse with a sad expression. "If you need anything, power turned on, a hand with anything, you come find me at the garage. Arthur was a good man. This valley owes him." He tipped his hat and drove off, leaving me in a profound and ringing silence. I walked up the driveway, my boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. Weeds grew thick and tenacious through cracks in the path. The air was still and warm. As I got closer to the house, I could see the details of its neglect. Shutters hung crookedly. Cobwebs laced the porch railings. It was a place that had been left to grieve in private. I climbed the steps which groaned under my weight and stood before the front door. The paint was cracked and faded, but the wood beneath it was solid oak. I pulled the iron key from my pocket. It slid into the lock with a satisfying click. The door swung inward on a long, low creak, opening into a world of dust and shadows. The air inside was cool and musty, thick with the scent of old wood, dried herbs, and time itself. Dust motes danced in the slanted shafts of afternoon light that pierced the gloom through grimy windows. The furniture was all there, draped in white sheets like a congregation of ghosts. A grand stone fireplace dominated one wall of the living room. A thick layer of dust covered every surface. It was a perfect time capsule of a life that had ended. I walked through the downstairs rooms, living room, dining room, a kitchen with old-fashioned appliances. Everything was neat, orderly, just, silent, abandoned. I felt like an intruder, a trespasser in someone else's memories. This was my mother's home. Had she run through these halls as a child? Had she sat at that dusty dining table? The questions were ghosts themselves, whispering from every corner. I dropped my duffel bag by the door and walked back out onto the porch, clutching the sealed letter from Miss Albright's office. The sun was beginning to dip towards the western hills, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple. The vineyard was bathed in a golden light. It was beautiful, in a wild, untamed sort of way, a sleeping beauty. I sat on the top step of the porch, the wood warm beneath me. It was time. My hands shook as I broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was strong and clear, the same elegant script that had been on the first envelope. "My dearest Leo," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have come home. I imagine you have 1,000 questions, and I know you deserve the answers. I am sorry, more sorry than words can say, that I could not give them to you in person. My name is Arthur Vance, and I am your mother's father. I am your grandfather. I know your file says your mother, Elena, was an orphan. That is a lie. It is a lie I helped create to protect her, and to protect you. Elena grew up in this house, on this land. She was bright and wild and beautiful, full of life. This vineyard was her whole world. But our world was small, and she dreamed of something bigger. When she was 19, she fell in love with a man from outside the valley. I didn't trust him. He was charming, but there was a hardness in his eyes. He was involved with dangerous people. People with money and power who saw our land not as a home, but as a commodity. They were part of a development group, the first iteration of the same company that is likely trying to buy you out right now, Viridian. Elena wouldn't listen. She was in love. She left with him, convinced they would build a life together. For a while, things seemed okay. And then you were born. That's when everything fell apart. The man she loved wasn't who he said he was. He was in deep, caught in their web, and he had used her and this land as collateral in a deal that went bad. They came for him. And they came for her. They threatened her. They threatened you, a newborn baby. They wanted this land, and they were willing to do anything to get it. Elena called me, terrified. She had escaped with you, but they were hunting for her. She knew they would never stop. We met in secret. She was a ghost of the girl who had left. She made me promise 2 things. First, that I would never sell this land to them. That I would hold it for you no matter what. She said this land was your only real inheritance, your anchor. Second, she made me promise to let her disappear. She knew that as long as she was connected to you, or to me, you would both be in danger. She was going to sever all ties, change her name, and run. She believed it was the only way to keep you safe. She had to become a ghost so you could have a life. It was the hardest choice of my life, but I agreed. I helped her vanish. We created the story that she was an orphan, that she had no family. We put you into the foster care system believing it was the only place they would never think to look for the heir to this land. A state-run institution felt safer than a home with a target on its back. It broke my heart every single day for 18 years. I watched from afar, Leo. I got reports. I knew you were safe, but I also knew you were alone. And the guilt of that has been a weight I have carried to my grave. This house, this land, it is not a gift. It is an apology. It is a promise I kept for your mother. Now the choice is yours. The people from Viridian are vultures. They have been circling this valley for decades. They will offer you a fortune. They will tell you it's just business. Do not believe them. For them, it is the final move in a game they started a generation ago. Selling to them would mean they win. It would mean your mother's sacrifice was for nothing. But keeping it, I know it is an impossible thing to ask of you. You are young. You have your own life to live. This place is a ruin. It will take everything you have to bring it back. Maybe more. I cannot ask you to take on my fight. I can only tell you the truth. There is money in a savings account to get you started. Miss Albright has the details. But there is more. Your mother knew you would need help, a real fighting chance if you chose to stay. She told me where she hid something for you, here in the house, a seed for your future. She said, "Tell him to look where the house keeps its heart warm." Whatever you choose, Leo, know this. You were not abandoned. You were protected. You were not unwanted. You were loved so fiercely that your mother gave up everything for you. This land is proof of that love. Your grandfather, Arthur. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through my tears. The story of my life, the one I had told myself for 18 years, a story of abandonment, of being a mistake, of being worthless. It was all wrong. I hadn't been thrown away, I had been protected. My mother hadn't left me, she had saved me. And my grandfather, this man I never knew, had spent his life as a lonely sentinel, guarding this place for me. The weight of their sacrifice settled on my shoulders, heavy and profound. I cried for the mother I never got to know, for the grandfather I never got to meet, for the scared little boy who had spent his life believing he was alone. I cried until the sun had completely set, and the valley was awash in the pale light of the moon. The chill of the night air finally seeped into my bones, and I stood up, my legs stiff. The house behind me was dark and silent. Look where the house keeps its heart warm. The fireplace. Of course. I went back inside, my footsteps echoing in the empty house. I used the flashlight on my phone to find my way to the living room. The great stone hearth was cold and black. I ran my hands over the rough stones, searching for anything unusual. A loose stone, a hidden lever. My fingers brushed against a section of the mantelpiece. It was wood, dark and heavy. As I pressed along its length, I felt a slight give. I pushed harder, and a small, almost invisible panel popped open with a soft click. Inside the small cavity was a metal box, old and slightly rusted. It was heavy. I lifted it out and carried it to the kitchen table, my heart pounding in my chest. With trembling fingers, I lifted the lid. It wasn't full of jewels or gold. It was full of cash. Stacks and stacks of $100 bills bound in old rubber bands. And beneath the money there was another letter, this one in a different hand. The writing was softer, more rounded. It was from my mother. "My darling Leo," it read. "If you are reading this, it means you came home. It means our plan worked. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me for not being there with you. There hasn't been a day that I haven't thought of you, that I haven't ached to hold you, but I couldn't risk it. The money in this box is everything I saved, everything I could scrape together from the life I lived after I left you. It's not a fortune, but I hope it's enough. Enough to give you a real start. Enough to fix the roof, or buy a tractor, or just give you breathing room. Use it to build a life, my love. Whether it's here on this land or somewhere else, just be happy, be safe. That's all I ever wanted. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Love, Mom. I counted the money. It was over $80,000. It was a fortune. It was a fighting chance. I sat there in the dark, silent house, with my grandfather's story and my mother's love laid out on the table in front of me. The multi-million-dollar offer from Viridian Properties felt like a temptation from a different world. It was an easy, clean break. A ticket to a life without struggle. But it was a life disconnected from this new, fragile truth that was taking root in my heart. This land wasn't just dirt and dead vines. It was a story. It was a legacy. It was the only tangible piece of my parents I had ever known. Selling it would feel like selling their memory. I spent the next few days in a daze, exploring the property. I walked every row of the vineyard, touching the gnarled, twisted vines. They looked dead, but Cal, who stopped by with a casserole and some advice, told me they were just dormant. "Good roots," he'd said, crumbling a bit of the dry soil in his hands. "This is good land." Arthur knew it. I explored the massive old barn, filled with rusting ancient equipment that looked like sleeping iron dinosaurs. I walked the perimeter of the 114 acres, following a crumbling stone wall through fields of wild oats and up to a ridge that overlooked the entire valley. From up there, the world felt vast and full of possibility. I called the power company and the water district, using the bank account Arthur had left me to pay the deposits. The lights flickered on that evening, casting a warm, yellow glow through the dusty windows of the farmhouse. It felt like the house was breathing again. I started cleaning, one room at a time. I swept away years of dust, washed the windows, and took the sheets off the furniture. Slowly, a home began to emerge from the tomb. I found more traces of my family. A pencil mark on a door frame measuring my mother's height as a child. A box of her books in the attic. A faded photograph of her and Arthur on the porch, both of them smiling. The vineyard green and heavy with grapes behind them. A week after I arrived, a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize rolled up the driveway. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was slick and polished, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked completely out of place against the rustic backdrop of the farm. "Leo Vance?" he asked, extending a hand. "Markham, from Viridian Properties. I've been trying to reach you. I trust you received our offer?" I didn't take his hand. I got it. "It's a generous offer," he said, his smile unwavering. "Top dollar for agricultural land in this region. Frankly, it's more than the land is worth in its current state. We see potential, of course. A luxury housing development, maybe a golf course, a real boon for the local economy." He gestured around at the overgrown vineyard. "Let's be honest, son, this place is a wreck. It would take a miracle to get it running again. You're a young man. You should be out there living your life, not chained to this relic. Take the money, go to college, travel the world, be free." Everything he said was logical. Everything he said was sensible. But I could hear Arthur's warning in my head. They are vultures. I thought of my mother's sacrifice. I thought of my grandfather's lonely vigil. Freedom, I was beginning to realize, wasn't about having no chains. It was about choosing the chains you were willing to wear. "The land's not for sale," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Markham's smile tightened just a fraction. "The offer is negotiable, of course. We can go higher. Name your price." "You don't understand," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "It's not about the money. This is my home." He scoffed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "This is a ruin, not a home. Don't be sentimental. It's a bad business decision. We will get this land, Mr. Vance, sooner or later. It's inevitable. You can make it easy on yourself and walk away a rich man, or you can make it hard and walk away with nothing." He dropped a business card on the porch railing. "My final offer stands for 30 days. Think about it." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving a trail of dust and a faint scent of expensive cologne that felt like a violation of the clean country air. His threat hung in the air long after he was gone. Walk away with nothing. They had done it to my family once before. What was to stop them from doing it again? That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of the decision was crushing me. I was just a kid. I had no idea how to run a farm, how to fight a corporation. I had $80,000 in a dilapidated property against a multi-million-dollar company that saw my home as a line item on a balance sheet. The fear was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. Taking the money, leaving this place behind. I could buy a nice apartment, a car. I would never have to worry about money again. It was so tempting, so easy. Listen, if you've made it this far, maybe you've been at a crossroads like this in your own life. A moment where you have to choose between the easy path and the right one. Between what the world tells you is valuable and what your heart knows is priceless. It's a lonely place to be, isn't it? When the choice feels too big and you feel too small. I want you to know you're not alone in that feeling. This community we're building here is for all of us who have faced those moments. So, if this is hitting home for you, drop a comment below and just write "I get it." Because I promise you someone else here does too. Now, let's get back to that farmhouse on that long, dark night. I was standing on the porch, looking out at the dark shapes of the vines under the moonlight, when I realized I wasn't just scared. I was angry, a deep, slow-burning anger. Angry for my mother, who had to give up her child to save him. Angry for my grandfather, who died alone on this land, holding on to a promise. Angry that these people, these vultures in suits, thought they could just roll in and erase a family's history with a checkbook. They hadn't just threatened me. They had insulted the memory of the only family I had ever known. The next morning, I drove into town with Cal, using some of the cash to buy a used but reliable pickup truck. My first stop was the library. I spent hours online, researching. I looked up everything I could about Viridian Properties, tracing their history of aggressive acquisitions and legal battles. I researched sustainable farming, vineyard restoration, and small business loans for young farmers. The more I read, the more the impossible task ahead of me started to break down into smaller, manageable steps. It was still a mountain, but now I could see the path. My second stop was a phone call to Miss Albright. I told her about Markham's visit and his threat. I told her I wasn't selling. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I was hoping you'd say that," she finally said, and for the first time I heard real warmth in her voice. Arthur would be proud. "Now, listen to me, Leo. This is going to be a fight. Viridian doesn't give up easily. They'll try to wear you down. They might use legal loopholes, zoning challenges, water rights disputes. You're going to need more than just a deed. You're going to need a plan." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm calling you. I don't just need a lawyer to execute a will anymore. I need a lawyer to help me save my home." "Good," she said. I've already been looking into some things. Arthur left behind more than just letters. He left behind records, decades of them. He documented every interaction he ever had with Viridian and their predecessors, every offer, every threat. He was building a case. I think we can use it to file a harassment injunction. It won't stop them forever, but it will buy us time. Time. It was the one thing I needed more than money. Time to learn, time to work, time to bring the vineyard back to life. Armed with a new sense of purpose, I went back to the farm and I started to work. I used the money from my mother's box. I hired a local crew, guys Cal recommended, to help me with the big stuff. We repaired the sagging porch and put a new roof on the farmhouse. We fixed the well pump and overhauled the ancient irrigation system for the vineyard. The biggest job was the vines themselves. For weeks, we worked from sunup to sundown, pruning. It was backbreaking, meticulous work. We had to cut away all the dead wood, reshaping each and every vine, encouraging new growth. Most people said it was a fool's errand, that I should just rip them all out and plant new ones. But Cal told me Arthur had always bragged about the rootstock. They were old, heritage vines, planted by my great-grandfather. Tearing them out would be like tearing out the heart of the place. So we pruned. My hands, soft from years of institutional life, became calloused and strong. My body, once thin and wiry, grew lean and hard. I was tired every night in a way I had never been before, a deep, satisfying ache that came from honest labor. As we worked, something amazing started to happen. The community, which had been watching me from a distance, started to step in. One day, an old farmer from the next valley over showed up with a tractor that was 20 years newer than the rusted heap in my barn. Arthur lent me his harvester one year when mine broke down mid-season, he said, refusing any payment, just paying it forward. The woman who ran the diner started dropping off hot meals in the evening. Cal was there almost every day after he closed the garage, teaching me how to fix the old equipment, showing me the rhythms of the land. They shared stories about my grandfather, painting a picture of the man I never knew. They told me how he'd helped them during droughts, how he'd co-signed a loan for a young family to start their own farm, how he'd fought against the first big developers who tried to change the valley. I learned that his isolation wasn't bitterness. It was a shield. He was guarding more than just his own property. He was guarding the soul of the whole community. And in choosing to stay, I had unknowingly picked up his mantle. I wasn't just Leo Vance, the foster kid. I was Arthur Vance's grandson. I belonged here. Spring arrived, and with it, a miracle. Tiny green buds began to appear on the gnarled, pruned vines. Life was returning. The vineyard, which had looked like a field of skeletons, was slowly, tentatively, blushing with green. Walking through the rows that morning, seeing that new life pushing its way out of the old wood, I felt a surge of hope so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. We could do this. We could actually do this. Of course, Viridian didn't give up. Miss Albright was right. A notice arrived from the county zoning board, challenging the agricultural status of the property due to its years of inactivity. Then came a letter from a water management agency, questioning my family's historic water rights. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, a war of attrition designed to bleed me dry, legally and financially. Each letter was a new wave of fear, a new sleepless night. But now I wasn't fighting alone. Miss Albright fought them in the courts, using Arthur's meticulous records to prove a pattern of corporate harassment. The community fought with me. At the zoning hearing, the meeting room was packed with farmers and residents of Solitude Creek. Cal spoke, and so did the farmer who lent me the tractor, and a dozen others. They spoke about the history of the Vance vineyard, its importance to the valley. They spoke of legacy, of community, of the difference between a home and a housing development. Faced with a unified front, the board voted in our favor. We had won the battle, but we all knew the war wasn't over. The final piece of the puzzle, the key to securing the future, came from an unexpected place. While clearing out the last of the junk in the barn, I found an old, locked footlocker tucked away under a dusty tarp. I recognized the lock. It matched the iron key I had been given, the one that opened the front door. I had assumed it was just for the house, but my grandfather, it seemed, was more clever than that. The key slid in and the lock opened. Inside wasn't money or another letter. It was a collection of soil surveys, water analysis reports, and geological maps dating back 50 years. At the bottom was a thick bound report with a title that made my blood run cold. Solitude Creek Aquifer, a comprehensive geological survey. It was commissioned by Arthur Vance. I spent all night reading it, and by morning I finally understood. My grandfather wasn't just a farmer. He was a scientist at heart, a custodian of the land. His decades of research proved that the Vance property sat directly on top of the primary recharge zone for the entire valley's aquifer. The water that every farm and home for miles depended on filtered through my land. The report detailed how a high-density housing development, or a golf course, with its chemical fertilizers and non-porous surfaces like asphalt and concrete, would irrevocably contaminate the water source within a decade. It wouldn't just destroy my farm. It would destroy the entire valley. This was the reason Viridian was so relentless. They knew. They must have done their own studies, and they were willing to poison a community for profit. This was Arthur's secret weapon. The proof that this land wasn't his to sell, not because of sentiment, but because of a sacred responsibility. He wasn't just protecting a promise to my mother. He was protecting everyone. The next time Markham from Viridian showed up at my gate, I was ready. I didn't wait for him to get out of his car. I walked down the driveway to meet him, holding the geological report in my hand. "Your final offer expired," I said, my voice calm and even. He gave me his slick, predatory smile. "I'm a reasonable man, Leo. We can still make a deal." "No, we can't," I said, and I held up the report. "I know about the aquifer. I know what you're planning to do to this valley. And now, so does my lawyer, and so does the County Water Board and the State Environmental Protection Agency. I sent them all a copy this morning." The smile vanished from his face. For the first time, I saw the man behind the mask, a cold, calculating shark that had just seen its prey grow teeth. He stared at the report, then at my face, and he knew he had lost. He didn't say another word. He just put the car in reverse and sped away down the driveway, leaving nothing but dust behind him. They were gone, for good. A year has passed since that day. The vineyard is thriving. The first harvest was small, but the grapes were good. With the help of my neighbors, we sold them to a local winery, and the money we made was enough to keep us going, to invest back into the farm. It's still hard work. Every day is a struggle and a lesson. But when I stand on the porch in the evening and look out at those green living rows of vines, I feel a sense of peace I have never known. I am not just a survivor of the system anymore. I am a farmer. I am a guardian. I am a son and a grandson. I found a home, not in the peeling paint of the farmhouse, but in the work itself. I found a family, not in blood, but in the community that rallied around me, that taught me how to belong. The ghosts of this place are no longer haunting. They are comforting. I feel my grandfather's pride in the solidity of the earth beneath my feet, and my mother's love in the warmth of the sun on my face. Their inheritance wasn't the land, or the house, or even the money. It was a choice, a chance to stand for something. They gave me a legacy of resilience and the opportunity to build a future out of a broken past, and that is a gift more valuable than any amount of money. This journey taught me that home isn't something you're given. It's something you build, it's something you fight for. And sometimes, the most valuable things we inherit are the battles that our parents and grandparents couldn't finish. It's our job to pick them up and see them through. So now I want to ask you, what have you inherited? It doesn't have to be land or money. Maybe it's a story, a struggle, value, a promise. What is the legacy that you are choosing to carry forward in your own life? Share it in the comments below. I read every single one because your stories matter. They are part of this community we are building together, a place where we understand that our pasts don't have to define our futures. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel. There are so many more stories to tell, for all of us who are learning to grow something beautiful in the places that were left for dead. Thank you for listening.